my daughter burst through the front door, eyes blazing, and yelled, "Dad, why on earth did you shut down the credit accounts?" She was trembling, saying her husband was furious. I just stared at Emily, my own daughter, standing there like a soldier for the man who'd been quietly bleeding me dry, and I felt something heavy shift inside my chest. She wasn't asking why I'd protected my savings or dug into suspicious charges. No, she was demanding to know why I had locked the accounts, as if my hard-earned money had suddenly turned into community property. She couldn't see the trap she'd walked straight into. She didn't realize how Nick had twisted her love into a shield and was using her to protect himself. But I saw it. Every bit of it. And I knew I was the one who'd have to pull the mask off. Ever gotten a credit alert that turned your stomach upside down? Drop a comment with your city and let me know if you've ever gone through anything like what I'm about to describe. Because for me, the alert came out of nowhere, like a fire alarm going off in a quiet room. It was 3:15 on a Friday afternoon, March 15th. I was at my desk, going over some investment notes, when my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything: urgent, new account activity detected. I'm 69 now, and my financial habits are about as predictable as clockwork. 2 credit cards. I pay cash for most things. No new accounts in more than 5 years. This alert made 0 sense. My pulse spiked as I tapped the notification. There they were, 3 accounts open in my name, all carrying heavy balances. Wells Fargo signature, $29,800. American Express Gold, $30,500. City Prestige, $26,700. A total of $87,000 in fraudulent debt tied to my name. The shock froze me for maybe half a minute, and then my business instincts took over. I grabbed my laptop and logged into my credit monitoring service. The picture that popped up looked like a crime scene. Restaurant tabs from places I'd never visited. High-end electronics I'd never bought. Cash advances I'd never taken. And then the part that stopped my heart, the mailing addresses. Every single statement was being sent to 1892 Willow Lane. Emily's address. My daughter's home. Emily works as a nurse at Riverbend Medical. Reliable, hardworking, honest, church every Sunday. But Nick Cooper was another story. He was always talking big about investments, crypto, next big thing, marketing schemes, fast cash. I didn't have time for denial. Running Whitman Construction for over 40 years taught me one thing: fix the problem before it grows teeth. I dialed the fraud line for Wells Fargo. I need to report identity theft and shut down this account immediately. The rep was sharp: account frozen, card canceled, investigation started. I moved to American Express. Same drill, same result. Citibank followed. By 4:30 p.m., all 3 fraudulent accounts were dead in the water. But I wasn't finished. I changed every password on every legitimate account I owned: bank, investments, credit monitoring, email. Whoever had my data was about to be locked out of my life completely. Then I called my attorney, Victor Ramirez. "Victor, I need this documented. 3 identity theft cases, all tied to my daughter's address. Put everything in writing." "Good Lord, Tom," he said, "you think Emily's involved?" "I don't know yet," I told him, "but I know how to protect myself while I find out." By 5 o'clock, my financial fortress was sealed tight. Every account secure, every loophole closed. I leaned back in my old leather chair and allowed myself one small breath of satisfaction. Whoever had been siphoning money from me was about to find out that Thomas Whitman didn't spend 4 decades building a multi-million-dollar business just to end up somebody's victim. My phone sat quiet. No desperate calls yet, no panicked messages, but I knew they'd come. The moment Nick tried to swipe one of those cards for his next expensive dinner, all he'd find were locked doors and dead accounts. I wondered how long it would take before they realized the game had changed. Saturday morning had been perfectly still until 8:30, when the front door banged open without a knock. I was in the kitchen, nursing my first cup of coffee, when Emily came storming in using her emergency key. Only this wasn't an emergency. This was a showdown. "Dad, why did you lock the accounts?" "My husband is furious," she shouted. Her voice bounced off the walls, louder than I'd heard since her teenage years. But Emily wasn't a teenager anymore. She was 35 now, a full-time nurse, married, and apparently under the impression that her father's finances were some sort of community pot. She stood in my doorway still wearing hospital scrubs from her overnight shift, dark hair twisted into a loose bun, brown eyes blazing with anger. She looked so much like her mother when she got fired up, except her mother would never have defended someone stealing from me. "Good morning, Em," I said evenly. "Which accounts are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Dad," she snapped. "Nick tried to use the credit card for groceries and it got declined. Everything's locked online. What did you do?" And that's when the pieces fell into place. Nick had sent her here. Too much of a coward to face me himself, so he'd used my daughter's loyalty like a weapon. Classic manipulation, and Emily had walked right into it. "I secured my accounts after finding some irregularities," I told her. "What I want to know is why your husband thinks he has the right to use my credit cards." Her anger faltered for a second. We said we could use them for emergencies. Remember our car repairs last year? One emergency 18 months ago doesn't give you permanent access to my finances, Emily." "But Dad, we're family. Nick's been helping with your investments, managing your online accounts. He's building our future." My stomach dropped. Nick managing my online accounts? When had I agreed to that? What online accounts exactly has Nick been managing? "I don't know the details," she said. "He handles our financial stuff. He's good with computers and investments. He told me you asked for his help because, you know, technology confuses your generation." The insult didn't sting nearly as much as the realization that my daughter had been completely snowed. Nick had convinced her that his theft was some kind of helpful service. "Emily, sit down," I said quietly. "We need to talk." "I don't want to sit. I want you to unlock the accounts so Nick calms down. He's been pacing all morning saying you don't trust us, that you're treating us like criminals." "Maybe because someone's been acting like a criminal," I shot back. "How can you say that about Nick? He loves me. Loves our family. He's working hard to give us a good life." I walked to my office, grabbed the credit reports, and spread them out across the kitchen table. "Emily, look at these. 3 accounts opened in my name without my knowledge." She stepped closer, anger giving way to confusion. "Wells Fargo Signature, American Express Gold, City Prestige," I said, tapping each page. "All opened within 6 months. All carrying $87,000 in balances. All with statements mailed to your house." Emily stared at the papers like they were written in another language. "I don't understand. What are these?" "They're credit cards someone opened using my personal information. Someone with access to my social security number, my birth date, my financial history. Someone who knew how to forge my signature and where to send the bills so I wouldn't see them. But I've never seen these statements. Our mail goes to—" She stopped mid-sentence, her face draining of color. "Emily," I said softly, "when was the last time you personally checked your mail?" "Nick, he always gets the mail. He handles our bills." And then silence stretched between us like a canyon. I watched my daughter's whole world start to crack right there in my kitchen. It hit her all at once. She didn't really know what mail came to her house, what accounts existed in her name, or what her husband had been doing behind her back. "Dad," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know anything about these accounts." The weight of Emily's realization hung heavy between us when I heard the low growl of an engine outside. Nick's black BMW pulled into my driveway like a warning shot. Emily's expression shifted from confusion to panicked loyalty. "He's here," she breathed, as if Nick's arrival could somehow erase the fraudulent paperwork spread across my kitchen table. Nick came striding through my door with that fake confidence of his, all swagger, no humility. "Tom, what's going on with these locked accounts?" he demanded. Emily turned toward me, upset. "Dad, there's some misunderstanding." I gestured to the stack of documents on the table. "No misunderstanding, Nick. $87,000 in fraudulent debt opened in my name, all mailed to your address." Nick's eyes flicked over the papers. For the briefest second, I caught something, recognition, not surprise, before he smoothed his face back into concern. "This is identity theft, Tom. Somebody's targeting our family. We should call the police right away." He rested a hand on Emily's shoulder protectively. "Honey, this happened to my cousin in Houston. These criminals are sophisticated." "Your cousin didn't have statements sent to his house," I said quietly. "They used our address to stay hidden. If those bills had gone to you, you would have caught this months ago. By using your house, they kept you in the dark." Nick's response was smooth, practiced, almost believable. He'd clearly prepared for this day. But he was trying to run a con on a man who'd spent decades dealing with cheaters. "Interesting theory," I said, "but it doesn't explain how somebody got my social security number, my mother's maiden name, and my full banking history. That's not information you can scrape off the internet." Emily looked from me to him, her face pale. "Maybe someone hacked your computer, Dad. Or went through your mail." Nick nodded eagerly. "Exactly. These thieves are professionals. They could have been watching your house, going through your trash, intercepting your mail. We should file police reports immediately." "Already done," I said, watching the flicker in his expression. "I filed the reports yesterday. Froze all the accounts. Changed every password. Contacted my attorney." "Your attorney?" Nick's voice rose a notch. "Dad, why'd you involve lawyers before talking to us?" Emily said, her voice full of hurt. "We're family. We're trying to help." The guilt trip. Classic emotional manipulation, make me feel bad for protecting myself. "I involved my attorney because someone with intimate access to my life has been systematically defrauding me," I said evenly. "Someone who knew how to forge my signature and where to send the evidence so I wouldn't see it." Nick's eyes hardened. "Are you accusing us? That's a serious charge, Tom. Emily and I have done nothing but help you since Laura passed. We've supported you, treated you like family." "You are family, Nick," I said quietly. "That's what makes this betrayal worse." Emily stepped between us, tears streaming down her face. "Stop it, both of you. Dad, Nick would never steal from you. And Nick, my father isn't some senile old man. Somebody needs to explain what's really happening." The kitchen went dead silent except for the ticking of Laura's old clock. Nick's friendly mask was slipping, something harder was showing through. "I think," Nick said slowly, "that grief and isolation are making you paranoid, Tom. Maybe it's time to consider you're not thinking clearly." It was a subtle threat, but I caught it. He was planting seeds of doubt, laying groundwork for a different kind of manipulation. "You're right, Nick," I said calmly. "I'm not thinking clearly. Which is why I'm hiring professionals to think for me." I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Miguel? It's Tom Whitman. I need your best private investigator today." Nick's face went pale. "Tom, that's unnecessary. We can work this out as family." "We tried that," I said, locking eyes with him as Miguel confirmed the appointment. "It didn't work. I'm going to find out exactly who you really are, Nick." Tuesday morning arrived with a strange kind of clarity, the kind that only comes after you've made the hard decisions. 3 days had gone by since I'd brought Miguel's best guy onto the case, and right at 9 a.m. my phone lit up with the call I'd been waiting for. "Mr. Whitman? This is Detective Ray Morales, retired SAPD. Miguel asked me to take your case personally." Ray's voice carried the weight of 3 decades spent chasing down financial criminals. If anybody could peel back the layers on Nick's real history, it was him. "What did you find?" I asked. "More than you're probably ready to hear," he said. "Can you meet me at my office in an hour? This one's better face-to-face." An hour later I was sitting across from Ray in his downtown office, watching him spread photos and documents across his desk like puzzle pieces. "Your son-in-law's a professional, Mr. Whitman," Ray said. "This isn't his first rodeo." He slid a photograph toward me. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes sat in a living room that looked eerily like mine. Eleanor Walsh. 78 years old. Widow. Lives in Alamo Heights, about 2 miles from your house. Ring any bells? I studied the photo. "Never seen her in my life," I said, "but I'm guessing Nick Cooper has." Ray opened a thick file and pulled out another photo. 4 years ago, Mrs. Walsh's daughter, Jennifer, married a charming young man she met at a coffee shop. Guess who? My stomach sank. "Nick," I muttered. "Different name back then," Ray said. "Nick Williams. Same method, though. He went through the daughter to get to the mother, gained access to personal information, opened multiple credit accounts. By the time Mrs. Walsh caught on, he'd stolen $45,000. What happened to the daughter?" I asked quietly. "Jennifer divorced him once the truth came out," Ray said, "but not before he'd burned the bridge between her and her mother. Eleanor spent 6 months in legal hell trying to prove the fraud. Nick disappeared before charges could stick." Ray spread out more papers, bank statements, credit applications, forged signatures. The pattern was a carbon copy of what had been happening to me. Same timing, same addresses, even the same kinds of accounts. "It's all the same playbook," Ray said. "Nick Cooper is a predator who targets older people through their adult children." "How many others?" I asked. "Eleanor's the only one I've found so far," Ray said. "But men like this don't usually stop at 2 victims. I'm still digging." I stared at Eleanor's photograph and saw my own story staring back at me in her eyes. "Is she willing to talk?" "Already asked," Ray said. "She wants to meet you this afternoon. Says it's time somebody stopped this guy." 2 hours later I was sitting in Eleanor Walsh's immaculate living room, listening to a story that sounded like a mirror of my own. She served tea in delicate china cups, her hands steady even as her voice carried years of pain. "He was so charming at first," Eleanor said. "Called me Mom. Brought flowers. Helped with the yard work. Jennifer was so happy, and I thought I'd finally gotten the son I'd always wanted." "When did you realize something was wrong?" I asked. "When my credit card got declined at the grocery store," she said, giving me a knowing look. "Just like what happened to you, I imagine. By then he'd opened 5 accounts in my name. 5 accounts I knew nothing about." She pulled out a manila folder thick with documents, bank statements, credit reports, even recordings of calls she'd made to fraud departments. "I kept everything." "Why didn't you press charges?" I asked. Her expression hardened. "I tried. But Nick convinced Jennifer I was getting senile, that I'd given him permission. She testified on his behalf, said I'd authorized everything. Without her support, the prosecutor said it was just a he said, she said." "What about Jennifer now?" "She finally saw the truth when he emptied her savings account too," Eleanor said quietly. "But it was too late for us. We haven't spoken in 4 years," Eleanor said, her voice cracking just a little. "He didn't just steal my money, Mr. Whitman. He stole my daughter." I reached across the tea table and took her hand. "He's not going to steal mine." Her grip tightened. "Be careful, Tom." When I started pushing back, Nick got dangerous. "He's not just a thief. He's a predator. The money's just a bonus." "What do you mean, dangerous?" I asked quietly. Eleanor's eyes turned hard. "He threatened me. Told me if I didn't drop the investigation, I might have an accident. An old woman living alone, Who would question a fall down the stairs? The room went still except for the steady ticking of her grandfather clock. "He's more dangerous than you think, Tom," she said. "And now that you've cornered him, he's going to fight back." That Thursday evening I called Emily and asked her to bring Nick over for dinner. My voice stayed calm, even friendly. 40 years in construction taught me that the best time to demolish something is when the structure feels most secure. They showed up at 6:30. Nick carried an expensive bottle of wine like a peace offering. "Tom, I'm glad you called," he said smoothly. "We need to clear the air about this misunderstanding." His smile was polished to a shine. "Families shouldn't fight over money," he added. "You're right, Nick," I said evenly. "Families shouldn't fight over money." I motioned to the dining table where I'd spread out Ray Morales's evidence-like exhibits in a courtroom: bank statements, photographs, credit reports. In the center sat a portrait of Eleanor Walsh staring back up at him. "Which is why," I said, "I think you should meet someone. Or maybe you already remember her, as your previous mother-in-law." The change was immediate. Nick's mask didn't slip, it shattered. His expression twisted into something cold and calculating. "You son of a," he hissed under his breath. Emily went pale. She'd seen flashes of Nick's temper before: the cursing at drivers, the contempt for waitstaff, the way he treated anyone he considered beneath him. She'd always made excuses. But now, watching that darkness turned on her father, she couldn't look away. Nick Williams. Different name, same scheme. 45,000 stolen from a 78-year-old widow using the exact same methods. His hands clenched. "That old bat told you about Jennifer," he sneered. "Everything: forged signatures, manipulated daughter, threats when she fought back." I rose to my feet. "She told me what you said about accidents happening to old women living alone." "Dad, what's he talking about?" Emily's voice trembled, this time with recognition, not confusion. Nick spun toward her, his face contorted with the rage she'd tiptoed around for years. "Your father hired some detective to dig up ancient history. He's trying to frame me for something from before I even met you." "Frame you?" I pulled out Eleanor's statements. "These are your signatures, Nick. Your handwriting. Your pattern." His eyes darkened. "You don't know what you're dealing with, old man." The pretense was gone. This was the real Nick, the one Emily had only glimpsed in unguarded moments when things didn't go his way. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," I said. "A con artist who targets older people through their children." Nick stepped toward me, his voice dropping into that low, menacing whisper Emily had heard him use on others. "You think you're so smart, building your little construction empire, playing grieving widower? You're just another Mark, Tom. Another lonely fool with too much money." Emily stood frozen, finally seeing what she'd refused to believe for 3 years. "I gave you 3 years," Nick snarled, his voice climbing into that sharp, ugly register Emily knew so well. 3 years of pretending to care about your dull stories and your dead wife. 3 years playing perfect son-in-law while you sat on your millions like some dragon." "Nick, stop," Emily pleaded, her voice slipping into that careful tone she'd practiced for years to calm him. "Shut up, Emily." His eyes cut back to me, full of hatred. "Your father wants games? Fine. You have no idea what I'm capable of, Tom," he hissed. "Eleanor Walsh learned. Jennifer learned when she picked her mother over me." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Nick's smile was all teeth, the same one Emily had seen just before he wrecked people's lives. "I'm educating you," he said. "You're a 70-year-old man living alone. Accidents happen: heart attacks, falls, gas leaks. Especially to people who stick their noses where they don't belong." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stared at her husband, no longer able to pretend she didn't know exactly what he was capable of. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "I'll leave," Nick sneered, heading for the door. "But this isn't over." He turned back with that look Emily recognized, the look that meant someone would pay. "You'll regret crossing me, old man." Friday morning I was at the San Antonio Police Department before the first pot of coffee was gone. Nick's threats still echoed in my mind, but the fear had hardened into a cold, steady resolve. 40 years in business had taught me that when somebody declares war, you don't flinch, you hit back harder. Detective Lisa Hernandez listened to my story with the patience of someone who's heard it all before. But when I laid Eleanor's documents alongside my own across her desk, her whole demeanor sharpened. "Mr. Whitman," she said, "this is a clear pattern of elder financial abuse. 2 documented victims, identical methods. We're looking at multiple felony charges. How long before you can arrest him?" I asked. "Give me 24 hours to coordinate with the DA. We'll want Ms. Walsh's testimony, and I'll need you both to come in for formal statements." By Saturday afternoon, Nick Thompson was in handcuffs. Emily called me, sobbing, from the police station. "Dad, they arrested Nick at work, in front of everyone. His coworkers, his boss. They're saying he stole money from you and some other woman. This has to be a mistake." "It's not a mistake, honey," I said gently. "Come home. We need to talk." When Emily arrived at my house her face was blotchy from crying, but her eyes had changed. The blind loyalty was cracking, and something else, clarity, was starting to show through. "The police showed me documents, Dad," she whispered. "Bank statements, credit applications. They look like Nick's handwriting, but he swears he didn't sign them." "What does your heart tell you, Emily?" I asked. She stared down at her hands for a long time. "My heart tells me I've been making excuses for 3 years. Every time Nick got angry. Every time money disappeared from our account. Every time he had explanations that didn't quite make sense. The bail hearing is Monday," she continued. "His lawyer's asking for $50,000. Are you going to pay it?" "That's not my decision to make," I said quietly. "It's yours." "Mine?" she asked, startled. "You're his wife. You're the one who has to decide whether you believe he's innocent or guilty. Whether you trust him to show up for trial, or whether you think he'll disappear like he did with Jennifer." Emily went silent again, thinking. Then she looked up. "Dad, can I ask you something? When Mom was sick, did you ever think about running away, just leaving because it was too hard, too complicated?" "Every day," I admitted. "But I didn't, because that's what love means. You stay and fight for the people who matter." That's what I told myself when Emily walked out of the courthouse that first day. Nick had been arrested the night before, and when the cops took him away, he looked right at her and said, "This is your father's fault. Fix it." He didn't say he loved her. He didn't say he was innocent. He just gave her orders, like always. Monday's bail hearing felt more like a formality than a real shot at freedom. His lawyer painted him as a well-respected marketing executive with deep community ties, but the prosecutor didn't buy it. She laid out the evidence, the fraud, the forged documents, the previous scams. The judge listened quietly and then set bail at $75,000. Emily didn't pay it. On Tuesday evening, my phone rang. The caller ID read Behar County Jail. I answered. Nick's voice was different this time, stripped of charm, of manipulation, of anything human. "You destroyed my life, old man," he hissed. "When I get out of here, you're going to pay for what you did to my marriage." "Is that a threat, Nick?" I asked. "It's a promise." I hung up without another word and immediately called Detective Hernandez. "Jake Thompson just threatened me from jail," I said, using his real name. "And I've got the recording." By Wednesday morning, his bail had been revoked for witness intimidation. The judge ordered him held without bond until trial. That afternoon, Emily showed up at my house carrying a manila folder and a look I hadn't seen since her mother's final days, that mix of grief and steel. "I filed the divorce papers this morning," she said quietly. and I called the prosecutor's office. I told them I want to testify against Nick. You sure about that? I asked. She nodded. I spent 3 years married to a stranger, a man who stole from you, who lied to me, who threatened your life. I'm done pretending I don't know who he really is. She sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where Nick used to charm us with his stories and fake smiles. I want to help you get justice, Dad. For you. For Eleanor Walsh. For anyone else he's hurt. I want to make sure he never does this to another family again. Her voice didn't shake this time. It was the strongest I'd ever heard it. November in San Antonio brings that kind of crisp, dry air that reminds you why you love Texas. It had been 8 long months since Nick's arrest, 8 months of court filings, witness interviews, sleepless nights wondering if justice would actually come. Now I was sitting in the Behar County Courthouse, watching my former son-in-law shuffle into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. He looked nothing like the man who'd once stood in my kitchen with expensive wine and a rehearsed smile. 8 months behind bars had stripped away the polish. His hair had grown out. His posture slumped. His eyes, once full of confidence, were now hollow. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Morrison took her seat, silver hair, sharp eyes, no-nonsense presence. I'd read about her. 30 years on the bench, known for coming down hard on financial crimes. Mr. Thompson, she began, her voice firm but calm. You stand accused of multiple counts of identity theft, elder financial abuse, and fraud. How do you plead? Nick's public defender, a weary-looking man named Rodriguez, rose beside him. Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a guilty plea to all charges in exchange for the prosecution's recommended sentence. A guilty plea. After 8 months of denials, after every legal motion and delay tactic imaginable, he was finally admitting what we'd all known from day one. Mr. Thompson, Judge Morrison said, do you understand that by pleading guilty, you are admitting to defrauding elderly victims of more than $130,000? Yes, Your Honor, Nick muttered, his voice barely audible. And do you understand that this plea includes full restitution to your victims and a prison sentence of 3 years? Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned toward the prosecution's table. Ms. Chen, she said, I understand you have victim impact statements ready. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Chen, a sharp woman in her 40s who'd handled our case with relentless precision, rose from the prosecution table. Yes, Your Honor. We have statements from Robert Martinez and Eleanor Walsh, both victims of the defendant's systematic fraud. Eleanor Walsh moved slowly toward the witness stand, her cane tapping softly against the marble floor. At 78, she looked fragile, but when she began to speak, her voice carried the weight of steel. Your Honor, Jake Thompson didn't just steal my money. He stole my relationship with my daughter. He destroyed 4 years of my life and left me afraid to trust anyone. But I'm here today because I want other families to know that predators like this can be stopped. When Eleanor finished, the room was silent, not out of pity, but out of respect. Then it was Emily's turn. My daughter walked to the stand with the same quiet determination I'd once seen in her mother. She looked different, thinner, yes, but stronger too, as if the fire she'd walked through had hardened her into something unbreakable. Your Honor, she began, I was married to Jake Thompson for 3 years. I thought I knew him. But I was living with a stranger, a man who was systematically destroying my family. He manipulated me into believing his lies, used me to access my father's personal information, and turned me into an unwitting accomplice in his crimes. Emily's voice wavered only once. Then it steadied. But today, I'm here to say that families can survive this kind of betrayal. My father taught me that love means fighting for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Jake stared down at his hands the entire time, never once looking up at the woman he'd deceived, the woman who'd finally found the courage to stop protecting him. When Emily stepped down, Judge Morrison reviewed the plea deal and the victim impact statements. Then she spoke, her tone cutting through the silence like a blade. "Mr. Thompson, you are a predator who targeted vulnerable elderly victims through their own family members. You violated the most sacred trust, the trust between parent and child, for your own personal gain. This court sentences you to 3 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You will pay restitution of $130,000 to your victims, plus all court costs and fees." The gavel struck with a sound that felt like thunder. Jake Thompson was led away in shackles, head bowed, saying nothing. No apologies. No excuses. Just silence, the kind of silence that comes when a liar runs out of words. Outside the courthouse, Emily and I stood in the crisp November air. The city was quiet, the sky washed clean after a morning rain. "Is it over, Dad?" she asked softly. "The legal part is," I said. "Jake will serve his time, pay what he owes, and, with any luck, never hurt another family again." She looked at me then, her eyes red but steady. "What about us? Can a family heal from something like this?" I smiled, the first real smile I'd managed in months. "It doesn't happen overnight. But yes. We heal by rebuilding, one honest day at a time." May in San Antonio arrived warm and alive, carrying that golden kind of sunlight that feels like a promise. 6 months had passed since Jake's sentencing. I found Emily in the backyard that Sunday morning, kneeling beside Carmen's rose garden. Her hands were covered in dirt, her hair loose in the breeze, her face calm. For the first time in years, I saw peace, not the fragile peace of denial, but the solid kind that comes after truth. She looked up at me and smiled. "Mom would have loved this spring." I nodded, my throat tight. "She would have loved seeing you find your way back." Emily stood and brushed the soil from her hands. The roses behind her were in full bloom, deep red, alive with sunlight. She'd moved back into her childhood bedroom after the divorce was finalized. Slowly, we were learning how to be a family again. "The white roses are blooming beautifully this year," she said, still kneeling in the dirt. "Mom would have loved them." "She would have loved seeing you here, taking care of them," I replied. Emily sat back on her heels, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Dad, I need to tell you something." I waited. "I've been going to therapy," she said softly. "My counselor thinks I should talk about the guilt I'm carrying." "What guilt, Mija?" "I brought him into our family. I married a predator and gave him access to everything you'd built. If I'd been smarter, more careful, more suspicious," her voice cracked. "I almost lost you because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." I knelt beside her in the garden, taking her hands. "Emily, you were a victim too. Jake spent years manipulating you, isolating you from your instincts. The fact that you found the courage to stand up to him, to testify against him, that takes more strength than most people ever find." "But how do I trust my judgment again?" she whispered. "How do I know I won't make the same mistake?" "By remembering what real love looks like," I said. "Your mother and I, we argued, we disagreed, but we never tried to control each other. We never used fear or guilt or manipulation. Real love builds you up, Emily. It doesn't tear you down." Emily nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her gardening glove. "Eleanor Walsh called yesterday. She wants me to speak at a support group for families affected by financial abuse." "What did you tell her?" I said yes. If my story can help one family recognize the warning signs, maybe some good can come from all this pain. Over the past 6 months, Emily and I had become unlikely advocates for elder abuse prevention. We testified before the state legislature about stronger identity theft laws. We'd worked with local banks to improve fraud detection systems. And we'd started a small support group that met monthly at the community center. Eleanor Walsh had become like family to us, the grandmother Emily never had, and the friend I never expected to find. Together, we'd helped 3 other families fight back, providing guidance, testimony, and proof that healing was possible. "Dad," Emily said as she stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "Do you ever regret fighting back? It would have been easier to just pay the money and let Jake disappear." "Easier, yes," I said. "But not right. When someone attacks your family, you don't negotiate. You don't enable. You fight back, with everything you have. Even when it means losing relationships. Especially then." I paused, watching her face in the afternoon light. "I've learned something, Emily. The people who truly love you will stand beside you when you're protecting what matters. The people who don't, well, you're better off knowing where they really stand." That afternoon, we drove to Eleanor's house for our monthly support group meeting. 7 families now, all survivors of financial abuse, all learning to trust again. I watched as Emily spoke gently to a young couple whose grandfather had been victimized by his caregiver. Her words were calm but sure, her empathy hard-earned. And in that moment, I felt Carmen's presence in the room, quiet, steady, proud. On the drive home, Emily was silent for a long time. Then she asked, "Dad, what would you tell someone going through what we went through?" I thought about it, watching the last of the daylight fade across the highway. "I'd tell them that protecting your family isn't selfish," I said. "It's necessary. I'd tell them that real love never asks you to ignore red flags or make excuses for cruelty. And I'd tell them this," I glanced at her, my voice firm. "It's never too late to fight back. Even if it's scary. Especially if it's scary. Because people who prey on families, they count on our fear, our guilt, our silence." Emily nodded slowly, a small, knowing smile on her lips. "Then I guess we just keep proving them wrong," she said. The road stretched out ahead of us, bathed in golden light, and I felt the weight of the past months lifting. "But sometimes keeping the peace means going to war," I said quietly, thinking of every hard choice we'd made to protect our family. As we pulled into my driveway, Emily turned to me with Carmen's gentle smile and her mother's quiet strength. "Thank you, Dad," she said softly. "Thank you for fighting for us. For showing me what real protection looks like. Thank you for coming home, mija, for choosing family over fear." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You don't have to thank me, mija. You stood tall too. That's what matters. If you're listening to this story and noticing warning signs in your own family, don't wait. Trust your instincts. Protect what matters. And remember, you're stronger than you think, and you're never fighting alone." Sometimes the greatest betrayal teaches the most valuable lessons about guarding the people and things you love. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful life stories that inspire and protect. Together, we can turn cautionary tales like ours into survival stories, and make sure every family knows they have the strength to fight back.